Hello, I am Miles Lerman, Chairman of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. You are about to hear the voices of 4 Holocaust survivors. David Bergman, survivor of 5 camps including Dachau, Lily Malnick, a survivor of Auschwitz-Birkenau, Bella Tovey, who survived both Graben and Bergen-Belsen, and Gutta Weintraub, who lived through the horrors of 3 labor camps, a death march, Ravensbrück, and Auschwitz. You will also hear from Curtis Whiteway, who at the age of 19 was one of the American soldiers who liberated Dachau. These survivors and liberators, these men and women, are growing older. Each year, fewer of them are with us. And as they pass on, so do the memories that make the Holocaust more than just a nightmare from someone else's world. Please listen to them carefully, and I will speak with you again at the end of the tape.
David Bergman.
When we arrived, this was, I found out later, in Dachau. And when we arrived, I had already passed out virtually. There 3 out of the 150 there survived. The rest of them just lay dead. And what they did is they picked me up with the hands and somebody else with the legs, and then they threw me in a stretcher, getting ready to take me to the crematorium. That's where their objective was. And somehow, somebody who was carrying me noticed a hand moving, that I was still alive. So, at a risk to his life, he took me into a barrack. It was actually like a shower room. And I was dazed at that time, virtually. I had no idea. I thought, and when I came to the bathroom there, I woke up and I thought I was dead. I was thought like in another world. What are these people doing here? Where am I? And I thought, I was totally dazed. I couldn't figure out even where I am. And then somebody came over and told me what happened, explained to me that you were just a few seconds away from being thrust into the crematorium. And they saw that you were still alive. They said, you're the first youth that age who actually made it alive. And then they took me and they hid me secretly in their barracks. So I was not even supposed to have been there. And I became to them like a hero. That here are these fathers who said, well, if I made it, then maybe their children would have made it through. And since I didn't get any rations, because the ration was there like a piece of bread, enough to keep him alive till they were actually were going to be taken to the crematorium. And each one would take a piece of bread, they would break off a piece and make up a slice for me so that I could survive. And they said, Dave, you must survive and let the world know what happened.
Lily Malnick.
I was 15 years old. I was all alone in this hell. They told us when we came in, they told us to undress and that we were going to be showered and that they were going to give us clothes. The place was so cold. We stayed there for hours to wait for our clothes. They took our clothes away and they gave us inmate clothes. And it was paper thin and no towels to dry. And for hours they let us stay there and people were crying and carrying on. We had no food. We were starving, hungry. And finally they gave us the clothes and then they put us in barracks. At early dawn, they whistled, and we had to get up and stay in appel. Appel means like roll call. And for hours we stayed in appel, and it was freezing cold. And it was mud. The roads were out of gravel and mud, and our feet were ice cold. And the next day they came after roll call, and they called us back to the same place where we had showered, and they gave us the clothes, and they tattooed me. They tattooed me, and they told us, from now on, this is my name. My name is A-5143. They said, from now on, you do not answer by your name. Your name is your number. And the delusion, the disappointment, the discouragement that I felt like I was not a human person anymore. They had shaved our heads, and I felt so ashamed. And also when they told us to undress and to shower, they made us feel like we were animals. The men were walking around and laughing and looking at us. And you take a young girl at that age who has never been exposed to a person, to a man, and you stay there naked. I wanted the ground should open and I should go in it.
Belatovi.
In the fall of 1944, we were evacuated from Graben. We heard rumors that the Russians are moving in, that they have occupied part of Poland. But these were rumors, and we were sent on what you call the famous Death March. It was winter. It was November, I think. It was cold. And we were marched for days. I don't remember how long. Then we were put into cattle trains. And I don't remember how long we were on the cattle trains. Some people tried to jump. There was always shooting at night. One night I thought I would jump, but I got scared. And we finally were brought into Bergen-Belsen. Bergen-Belsen was not like Auschwitz. There were no gas chambers. They didn't need any gas chambers. It was a really death camp. I remember we were brought into a big, empty barrack. There was only straw on the floor. We were pushed into that barrack so that you could not stretch your legs. We were sitting with our knees practically up to our, next to our chins. And you couldn't stretch your legs. And it was cold, and we were hungry. But I want to tell you that it didn't take long, because people were dying. Almost immediately, people were dying all around us. And we had to take out dead people, and we had to carry them out outside. There were always big piles of dead bodies. And I carried many. I don't know how I kept going. I'll tell you, people have some way of protecting themselves. I know that I never looked at the faces. Just didn't look at the faces.
Guta Weintraub.
And he stood at the end of the grave and said to us, you have 1 minute, he said it in German, he said, you have 1 minute to say your prayers, you'll be shot. I didn't know what, but I knew that I had to do something. So I jumped out and jumped straight. He didn't expect it. And I jumped straight to him. And I knew that if I approach him from the front, I have no chance of doing anything. So I jumped on his back. I put my fingers around his throat and I started choking him. I jumped with my legs and I put them around his mid-body. It's just like you piggyback, playing with a child. And that's how I hung to him and kept on pushing my fingers into his neck My fingernails were even longer than now. And of course, since my grip was so strong and he couldn't walk because I had my legs around his, we both fell. And I still didn't let go because I knew if I let go, it was going to be the end of me and especially the end of everybody else there. So I did not for a long time. And finally, they couldn't shoot because they were afraid that if they shoot, they may shoot him. So they didn't shoot. But finally, the stupid idiots came running and pulled us apart. And at that point, he took a gun, and the position of my body was evidently so that my head was to the side, and so it basically grazed my skin and part of my bone, since my head was that way. But nevertheless, I was bleeding a lot, and I did not move. Well, I immediately realized that I wasn't hurt badly, that I wasn't not near anything similar to being dead or anything like that, but I could not move because that would be the end of me again. And then he left, satisfied that I was dead. He wouldn't waste another bullet because why waste another bullet where he could use it for somebody else?
Curtis Whiteway.
As we burst into the camp and spread out, I saw in front of me a row of barracks, wooden one-story barracks. And they were standing there, totally shocked that, of course, the explosion of the gate being blown in, these strange men in strange uniforms running in, and they didn't know who we were. And I ordered my men to start going through the buildings and start cleaning them out. One of the men went over the far wall, as I remember, to my left, and there were shower heads and faucets all over the wall. He turned them on, he called out to me, and he says, "What the hell's going on here?" And I looked over questioningly, and he said, "There's no water." And I just shook my head, I didn't know. At that point, another man came to me, and here again he said, "You better come with us." And we followed them into another building behind. On the far wall was a battery of ovens, big ovens. I never did count the ovens, but they were on fire, and now we were beginning to understand that this was some kind of an execution camp, or as we now call extermination camp. We left that room and went out into the yard again. And I noticed, for one thing, of course, the condition of these people. They were in a horrible condition of starvation, of disease. I called out to them as I approached them. I said, "Does anybody speak English?" And finally, one man spoke up, very much like a zombie, but he answered me yes in English. So I addressed him personally, and I came over to him and I looked at him and I said, "We are American soldiers. It's all over. Do you understand what I'm saying to you?" And he stood there frozen in place. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking over my shoulder, and he was apparently looking at my men who were still, some of them running through the buildings there. And then the first thing, he wouldn't change his expression on his face, but tears started coming down his face. And then he started to cry, and he started to sob. And then he started to sob his heart out, and he fell to the ground on his knees. And he just cried his heart out. And I stand there watching him and waiting.
This is Miles Lerman again. The 5 people you have just heard are among the last living witnesses of the Holocaust. Right now, the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum is in a race against the clock, so we must ask you for your financial support. Even though we rely on volunteers and keep costs as low as possible, More must be done. Please help us today with a gift of $50, $100, or $1,000, or as much as you can afford. You may send your deductible gifts payable to the United States Holocaust Memorial Council in the enclosed envelope, or mail to Post Office Box 96818, Washington, D.C. 20090, 6818. Please be generous, and thank you for your support for the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum.